everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this very special Forgotten Feminists episode. It's very special because I normally have these conversations on Saturdays, but I really wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to speak with Dalia before the holidays because she is such an amazing, impressive woman. And I really wanted to learn more about her, hear more about her background. As some of you may have read in her bio already, Dalia has had to flee from her country of origin because she spoke the truth about Hamas on October 7th. But I'm going to allow her to get into a lot more detail about that. Dalia, ahlan, marhaban.
Ahlan, Yasmin. I'm very excited to be with you. Thank you for the invitation, and I look forward to having a good conversation.
Me too. Me too. I really look forward to learning a lot about you, and I know all these people that have joined probably have a lot of questions for you as well. But let's start at the beginning. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with my background or not, but my mother is also from Egypt. I lived in Egypt for a few years, and I was just there recently. And so I have, an intimate understanding of what it's like to grow up as a girl in Egypt. And I already knew from seeing you, reading about what you've done, I already knew immediately. I'm like, this is a unique woman who must have had a unique childhood. You've had a really great quote about your father, which I absolutely loved. I'm going to share it with everybody right now. You said in a tweet, my late father said to me, be the light in the darkness, be the flower in the trash. Everything I am doing in my life is inspired by his words. Regardless of how ugly or dark life gets, you can always find a way to make it better. I probably, I may be wrong about this, but I'm going to probably attribute a lot of who you are today to the fact that you had such a wonderful dad. But I'll let you tell me. Tell me about your childhood. What was it like growing up as a young girl in Egypt for you?
Thank you so much, Yasmin. Yes, of course. And thank you for bringing up this quote from my father because it means a lot to me. It literally has been the light guiding me all over the way from the very beginning. Because I remember when I was young, I always adopted this idea of being open. As you know, like you said, it firsthand. Growing up in Egypt is not easy. It's a very closed society. Growing up as a woman, in particular, in Egypt, is as a girl, as a woman, is not easy at all. It's a very closed society, contrary to what is being promoted about it. We are suffering from many social laws and many religious laws that are being imposed on us from the very early years of our lives. To be a good girl, you have to act in a certain way. The society always expects you to act in a certain way. Your family expects you to act in a certain way. But so actually, I have this rebellious soul in my heart, in my deep inside of me. And my father somehow realized this from a very early age. And unlike the stereotype of all of the men in Egypt in general being over controlling and being, this patriarchal mentality, my father was not like that. Despite being a military engineer, he was a military man, but he was not like that at all. He was very open-minded. He was very supportive to me as his eldest child and always proud of me being rebellious against these laws and against these people who are trying to control me and control my will all the time. And I used to complain to him all the time about how bad how the people are want to control me. And he always responded like this: be the flower in the trash. Don't mind what is happening around you. It should not affect you. You should be the flower and turn the whole scene into something beautiful, even if the whole scene is already a trash. So his words remained with me forever, for until today, and it will remain with me forever, and has been guiding me all the way. Including even when I started activism, I started relatively early, like in high school, and then in the first years of college, I started like to care much about women's rights. I was mainly fighting against female genital mutilation, which is a horrific practice that's happening in our country and also in some African countries. And this was like my first passion, my main cause. Like, I have to make it stop from happening. And from there, I started to learn about the great world about human rights activism. And I started to join human rights organizations and become an activist in hope, like, to make some change in our society. Then I was able to play a role in the Arab Spring, and we were able like to make massive changes happen. But soon after, we got this big shock of seeing the Muslim Brotherhood like hijacking our revolution and our work and just becoming the new rulers of Egypt. At that time, honestly, this was a big shock for me. Like, I thought, like, somehow feeling guilty for enabling them somehow to get to this
Mm.
position, although indirectly. Of course, like, I
Mhm.
didn't do this in purpose, it's completely indirectly. But making this revolution enabled the Muslim Brotherhood and the Salafists to take over, and they started to like promote or to voice things that are very hostile to women in particular, like encouraging child marriage. Not only encouraging, actually, they were discussing legislations to enable like families to marry their girls at 9 and 8 years old, and also making legislations to allow the practice of female genital mutilation, horrific things like this, you know. So I thought, okay, the fight is not over. Let me get involved somehow in getting these people out of power. And I continued my activism, and thank God, like, the Egyptian people stood up against them, and we were able to get rid of them soon after that. And my fight continued afterwards because I'm a big believer in peace, and I think that if Arab-Israel peace is achieved somehow, it will definitely lead to a better region, to will help us get rid of those Islamists, Islamic extremists, and the radicals. That's why I continued like pressuring for this, and participating even on track to initiatives like people to people dialogues and talks to enable this and make this happen, until unfortunately recently, when I decide like to speak up against the terrorism of Hamas practiced against Israeli civilians, particularly against the women and the children in Israel. I was received by a horrible backlash from my fellow Egyptians, from my fellow Muslims, who actually like are now labeling me as a Zionist, as a disbeliever, blasphemy, you know, and accusing me of committing high treason and being a national security to my own homeland, Egypt.
Mhm.
It's really sad, you know.
So it absolutely is, and we're going to get into that. But before we talk about that, I wanted to address a couple of things that you said. First of all, you identified how the Islamists hijacked the Arab Spring, took it over, and were quite successful in taking it over so far that Morsi became the president. So this hijacking of secular or humanist or sometimes left-wing causes, this idea of Islamists hijacking it is not a new one. It's one that happens all the time. We've seen it all over the Middle East. We've got some people here from Iran that are in the call today. Very famously in Iran, that's exactly how the Islamic regime of Iran came to power, was through hijacking a revolution that was started by people that were left-wing secular people. And so they did the same thing in Egypt, and we can see that happening currently, right now. We can see that happening in the streets of New York, all over America, all over Canada, all over Australia, all over the UK. We can see that same alliance going on where the Islamists hijack situations, get themselves involved, make people who are not their allies think that they are allies, so that they can infiltrate their cause and then take it over. So, I think it's really important that you've talked about that, because there's a lot of people that are maybe not familiar with that history, and they see this happening all over the West today, and they're very confused. They're like, why are the left-wing liberals and progressives siding with the Islamists? What's going on? Why are they friends? They're not friends. The Islamists will infiltrate, they will get themselves involved in any cause that's going in the direction that they want it to go, where they can get power, and they will hijack it, and they will eventually take it over. And whoever it was that had initially started this, groundswell, this, this work towards progress is going to be annihilated when they take over. And I'm really sorry that that happened in Egypt, but it needs to be said that Egypt took care of that immediately. I was so proud of the Egyptian people. I mean, I'm not under any, I know how difficult it was, and I know how many lives were lost and damaged because of it. But it was a very, very necessary thing to do. The Muslim Brotherhood has been trying to get into power in Egypt for decades, and so the fact that they got in then was really devastating for a lot of us. But of course, it was like the best day for Muslim Brotherhood people all over the world. But thank goodness Egypt was able to get rid of Morsi, and you guys got back on the right track.
Yeah.
And now you are, I want to ask you, you did mention that FGM was how you started all of this activism, and I have to commend you for that, because FGM in Egypt was a huge problem. I think it was close to 90% of girls were mutilated, and now it's been criminalized. So that's fantastic. That doesn't mean that it's been eradicated, of course. It's still happening in secret, but the fact that it has been criminalized is a huge success story, because at least it makes it more difficult. It's not normalized, it's not accepted. So thank you so much for your work in that. I have a very personal story connected to that. So it means a lot to me that you spent so much of your time and energy on that very, very important cause. And I just want to plug your book now. You have a book called The Curious Case of the Three-Legged Wolf: Egypt, Military, Islamism, and Liberal Democracy. So I think that that's probably a lot of what we were just talking about right now, that sort of intersection between liberal democracy and Islamists and what is going on here. It is an extremely curious case, Dalia. So thank you for writing that book. I'm sure that it'll bring a lot of light to that discussion. And you're also the director of the Middle East and Eastern Mediterranean Studies. Now let's go back to October 7th and talk about how you speaking up, stating the truth about what happened in Israel, about what Hamas did in Israel. How has that affected your life? How has that affected your work? But before you tell us how it's affected your life and your work, tell us what it was that you'd even said, because now you're being, a lot of things are being attributed to you, Dalia is this, Dalia is that. So I want you to tell us, why you chose to speak up, what it was that you spoke up about, and then what was the backlash to that?
Yes, wonderful. Thank you, Yasmin. Like a lot of food for thought what you just mentioned about the Islamists and FGM and October 7 and the curious case of Egypt, of course. But believe me, like it's all related. What's happening in Egypt is very much related to what's happening in Israel. Hamas war right now is very much related to what's happening in Sudan and Libya, all over the region. It's all related. And if you look at the main source of all of these conflicts, you will find out that it is a conflict between Islamists on one side and the secular nation states on the other side. It's like the core of all of these conflicts. Of course, there are like other layers above these conflicts that appear later on, but this is like the base. And I think it is also something that the Western world has to be very careful about, because this dilemma or this big problem is now being exported to them purposefully by Islamists. And we can just, anyone can search for this. There is a text written by the Muslim Brotherhood leaders in the United States in 1990s. It was discovered by federal investigations and now released for public to read. But in this text, the Muslim Brotherhood had a clear plan about sabotaging the West from
The
within.
100-year plan.
Exactly, to sabotage the West from within, which means that they had a clear vision on what they want to do to make these nation states, successful nation states in the West, collapse so they can build their own Islamic caliphate upon the ruins of these nation states. This is what they have been doing in the Middle East for so long, ranging from Iran to its militia all over the region, up to Hamas, up to the Sunni Islamist organizations like the Muslim Brotherhood, ISIS, and Al Qaeda, and so on. All their goal is simply just to dismantle the nation states and build their own Islamic caliphate upon this nation state. In the West, they adopted the strategy of infiltrating into the Western societies and like putting their children who would normally be like second generation citizens of these countries into certain groups of influence in these communities so they can promote their ideas. One of these manifestations of this evil plan we are seeing happening right now in reaction to the Israel-Hamas war. All this twisted rhetoric about Hamas being a resistant movement, about being heroes of or a champion of the Palestinian cause, and this for me is nonsense. Nonsense. It has nothing to do with the truth. But this was being told to Western youth in the United States, in Europe, in universities, everywhere, by their Muslim fellows, by their Islamist, I would say, fellows, who are saying this on purpose to promote some lies, to ally them on the side of the evil rather than being on the side of the good. And it's really shocking to see that people in the US, for example, in American universities, people who are women, who belong to the LGBT community, are supporting Hamas. They don't even understand that if they live under Hamas and the Sharia law, they will be immediately killed just for being an LGBT person, you know? It's crazy. It's crazy. So when you see how brainwashed they are, you will be shocked. But there is a reason for that. Like Islamists has been preparing for this moment for so long. That's why we are seeing this extreme international polarization around the issue. Although it's ethically, it's very clear. We have a group of terrorists who attacked civilian people in their homes on a holiday. They attacked people in their pajamas, you know, they raped women, they killed children, they arrested toddlers even and kidnapped them and arrested them for over a month and tortured them. And like it's a clear case. It does not even need to argue about. It's a clear case of terrorism. And there is a state responsible about these civilians, which is the Israel state. It reacted like any other state in the world would react when it is faced by a terrorist or when it is attacked by a terrorist organization like Hamas. But actually, Hamas twisted the whole rhetoric and made it appear like the Israeli government woke up one day and decided just to kill some Palestinians, just out of the blue, just because they think the Palestinian number is increasing. Like, I know it sounds like a joke, but it was said in our media. It was said in the Egyptian media and the Arab media, like by reputable analysts, you know. At the beginning of the massacre and the attack by Hamas, I was reading the Arab news. I was reading the Egyptian news and watching the Egyptian news. So I thought, like, as they were saying, it was just a clash. between Israeli soldiers and Hamas militants, which happen every now and then. So I thought, okay, just another clash. It's not a big deal. But then later, I was like 2 days later in particular, I was invited by a video conference in Arabic that was organized by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Israel and the Ministry of Defense. And it had journalists from all over the Arab world. More than 300 people were attending, journalists, activists, researchers, and they showed us the actual footage of what happened, like videos collected from the cameras of the houses, from the streets of the kibbutz where the massacre happened, and where the music festival was attacked. And they showed us like the real scenes of this horrific attack. And at that time, I felt like anger, and I was so offended by the many lies that the Egyptian and the Arab media was promoting about the issue, and how they accept, like, to be honest, like, regardless of religious background or nationality or anything, I related to these women who were brutalized and were raped and murdered and mistreated simply because they are Jewish women or because they are Israelis. It's not an excuse. And all these children, even the animals, they killed the animals like dogs and cats. They killed them. They didn't let, they burned houses. They didn't let any sign of life, or like, it was an attack on humanity. This massacre was an attack on humanity, not only on the Jewish or Israeli people. It was an attack on humanity. So I thought I should stand up. And I have a good following on social media, so I thought, okay, the first place I can do that, as long as our media is lying, I will go and say the truth. And I did that. I went and I said the truth, and actually, of course, expectedly, I received a horrible backlash from the many trolls on social media. And I thought, okay, fine, it will take 2 or 3 days and it will go away as usual, because it happened to me many times before. But soon after that, it was picked by the Egyptian media, by the state-sponsored media in Egypt. And by state-sponsored, like, it's really state-sponsored, like the state dictates everything that's being said in these stations. So being attacked by these media stations means the state itself is against me. So at the beginning, I said, okay, perhaps this is not the case. They made a mistake or something, but it became increasing once and again, and it's increased. Like, the attack is increasing to the extent that some members of parliament appeared on these TV stations to call me a traitor, and to call me a threat to Egypt's national security. And see the irony here, like, someone like me who's a liberal thinker is a threat to Egypt's national security, while all the radicals who are cheering for Hamas and cheering for the Muslim Brotherhood and supporting the Salafists are not a threat to Egypt's national security, which is so ironic. So I thought, okay, it will go over, but unfortunately it didn't. Like, I started like to have death threats coming to my phone, radical Salafists going to my mother's house and looking for me and asking like to have my address or my phone number, like to kill me and things like that. And thank God it went well, and my mother was not hurt or anything, but it was really scary. So I contacted people in the authorities in Egypt and I said, guys, I need protection. And their reaction, unfortunately, was like, we're sorry, we cannot protect you. I said, is it because I criticized Hamas? They said, no, not really, but because you said you support Israel in its war on Hamas. So the word support Israel for them was the sin that I committed, it was the big crime that I committed. And thus they wouldn't mind seeing me being killed by some fanatic in the street just because I said I support Israel, which is crazy because Egypt has a peace treaty with Israel that has been in place for years.
I was just going to say that. And it's supposed to be a secular country. So law enforcement is choosing to not help an Egyptian citizen because they disagree with your ideas. You've committed the crime of wrongthink. And so law enforcement refuses to protect you against death threats.
Unfortunately true, yes. And the thing is that in Egypt, yes, we have a peace treaty with Israel. Yes, we have very good relationship with Israel over the past 7 years of economic cooperation, military cooperation, and everything. But unfortunately, when it comes to the deep state in Egypt, they still carry a lot of hatred towards Israel. Some of them call, still up till today, they still call Israel the historical enemy of Egypt. And up till today, every year we celebrate the anniversary of the war with Israel in 1973. But we don't celebrate the anniversary of the peace treaty, which was amazing. Until today, President al-Sadat, who made the peace treaty with Israel, is being criticized for what he did and being seen as a traitor, although in my opinion, he was a hero. So as you can see, like the deep state in Egypt is still a very big problem when it comes to peace with Israel or peace in general. And they are also still a problem when it comes to democratization and human rights, as we all know. So the thing is that yes, so actually after that I was invited to an interview with the INSS, the Institute on National Security Studies, to comment on the issue. I didn't say, like, of course, like my words were taken afterwards to appear like I am encouraging Israel to kill the Palestinians and I hate the Palestinians. Of course not. Of course, I'm completely against the killing of any civilians, regardless of their background. They are all humans. And of course, I sympathize with the Palestinian people who are going through all this suffering right now. But at the same time, we have to like set the truth clear, to be clear about where the truth is, who caused this suffering to both the Israelis and the Palestinians. It's Hamas. Mainly it's Hamas. So this is what I said, and I said like I am 100% supporting Israel in its war on Hamas, and I believe that if Hamas is removed, this will be good. Hamas and the other terrorist organizations, this will be good for the entire region. And I called upon Arab countries, including my country, Egypt, to support Israel in this war for the good of the region. Of course, like my words were like taken in a completely different direction. The video of the interview went viral, and I started like unfortunately some lawyers in Egypt who are also very close to the state used this interview to file legal claims against me, accusing me of high treason and threatening Egypt's national security and cooperating with Zionist organizations, like a number of accusations that each one of them could put me in jail for the rest of my life, you know? So so right now I had, unfortunately, I had to leave with a broken heart. I had to leave my country where I lived my whole life. And right now I'm in a different country, and like not sure about what will happen next in my life, trying to rebuild my life from scratch again. But the only thing I am so determined to keep and to keep using is my voice, because I think this is the main goal of the Islamists from the beginning, like, to silence me and silence the people like me. So this is the one thing that I will not let them get uh, anytime. No, even if it would cost me my whole life, I will keep speaking against them and I will keep fighting against them.